Please join in a moment of centering silence so we can be fully present with each other this morning. And now let's become musically present with each other by turning to the words for our ingathering hymn, which you'll find inside your order of service. And let me add my voice to welcome all of you. Good morning. Welcome to the sobering reality of winter. Another Sunday here at First Unitarian Society, where independent thinkers can gather in a safe, nurturing, and mercifully warm environment today to explore issues of social, spiritual, and ethical significance as we try to make a difference in this world. I'm Steve Goldberg, a proud, intellectually gifted member of this congregation, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to any guests, visitors, and newcomers. If this is your first time at First Unitarian Society, I know that you'll find it's a special place. And if you'd like to learn more about our special buildings, we conduct guided tours after every service, and all you need to do is meet us over here by the windows after the service, and we'll take care of you. Speaking of taking care of each other today, this is a great time to silence those pesky electronic devices that you will not need. You will not need these for the next hour, I promise you. And this admonition goes for those of you watching or listening at home, because we can hear your ringtones here. And if you are accompanied this morning by a youngster, and you think that youngster might prefer to enjoy the service from a more private space, we offer a couple of options, including our child haven at the back corner of the auditorium, and some comfortable seats out in the commons just outside the main doorway. As is the case every weekend, our services are brought to us by a wonderful team of volunteers, and they deserve our thanks. So when you have a chance, please give them a high five, a hug, or a handshake, or better yet, offer to shovel their driveway. So the people who are helping us with today's service include David Bryles running the sound system. Our lay minister is Tom Boykoff. You were greeted by the smiling face of Dorrit Bergen as you entered this morning. And the following people are members of our usher team. The ushers include Liza Monroe, Dick Goldberg, Terry Millar, and Susan Millar. And the all-important hospitality and coffee are being provided by Sandra Plitch. And John Powell is our tour guide. A couple announcements before we get on with the service today. Remember that Thursday is our very popular Thanksgiving potluck luncheon. You can read more about it in the Red Floors Bulletin. And a couple more announcements. Our family-to-family gift program is up and running, and head to the Commons after the services today to choose and select a family that you would like to partner with in the family-to-family holiday gift program. You'll be able to beat the Black Friday rush, and please tell the elves who will be there at the table if you can help the social workers load their cars with the gifts on December 14 or 15. In addition, I think you've seen the signs and evidence of Art in the Right Place, which is taking place right here until 4 o'clock today. The art fair is across the parking lot in the Landmark building. More than 40 artists have gathered for this annual Art in the Right Place event. It's an annual fundraiser that we run for our children's religious education program. It features quality, unique items of many genres. 13 of the 40 artists are members of FUS. Great opportunity to keep your holiday dollars local while supporting an important program right here at FUS. And I understand there's food there as well. And lastly, for the final announcement, I have lost track of how many days until the next cabaret. But I promise. I promise to find out what that number is and let you know. Meanwhile, please sit back or lean forward to enjoy this morning's service. I know it will touch your heart, stir your spirit, and trigger one or two new thoughts. We're glad you're here, including some of the people over there.
Let this hour be for us a time of celebration and a time of renewal. In celebration, let our minds be awake to the common miracle of the earth, the flowing grace of the river, and the answering spirit within us. And in renewal, let our minds be aware of the deep down freshness of a new day, of holiness let loose in creation, and of the responding yes within us. Let this hour be a time of celebration when we feel at one with the mystery in which we move and have our being. And let this hour be a time of renewal when we let go of past disappointments and present anxieties to embrace the healing power of our communion. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for the lighting of our chalice. And if you will join me in repeating the words of affirmation printed in your program. We light this chalice as a symbol of our thanks for the bounty of life. We are grateful for the many gifts we have been given, gifts of love and laughter where mutual support is most evident, gifts of conscience which encourage us to contribute to the common good, gifts of hope which give purpose to our days and meaning to our efforts. For these and many other unnamed gifts of life, we give thanks. And in the spirit of that thanks, please turn to your neighbor and exchange with them a warm and friendly greeting. Please be seated. At this time of the month, we generally set aside a few moments at the beginning of the hour for the sharing of joys and sorrows, a time for members, friends, and even visitors to our congregation to relate to the entire gathered community some special event or circumstance that has affected your life or the life of someone close to you in recent weeks or months. General announcements, news items, political and social appeals are not appropriate during the sharing of joys and sorrows. And so for the next few minutes, anyone who wishes is invited to step to the front of the auditorium and, with Tom's assistance, light a candle in one or the other of the two candelabra. Then, using the microphone, briefly share your name, if that's comfortable for you, as well as your message. Please note that our services are webcast, so listeners are not restricted to the people sitting in this room. You may also come forward and wordlessly light a candle of commemoration and then simply return to your seat. And now I would open the floor to the sharing of these important matters of our lives. And we would start, Tom, with a candle of sorrow for Ruth Hersko, longtime member of First Unitarian Society, who passed away recently, and Kelly Crocker conducted her memorial service here yesterday morning.
Hello, I'm just really joyful for holiday spirit and holiday magic, as I have a 3-year-old, and boy, Christmas and the holiday season is so much better with magic.
I'd like to share an amazing joy. We came to the Hungarian partner dinner at FUS, and a total miracle occurred. My father finally said that he had never been to Europe, and so my brother, his partner, my husband, my dad, and I went for a cruise together, and it was because of the miracles that happen right here.
I have a joy that yesterday I took a leap in trying something new by decorating a cake with a cornucopia.
Hello, my name is Dick Lathrop. I have a number of joys, but actually the one that I want to say is that 20 years ago, I met a really fine man who, as a limnologist like myself, came over on sabbatical, and we have been just the best of friends ever since. And he is here on sabbatical, but this will be his last week here going back, and he's been singing in the choir, so I'd like him to introduce himself while I light a candle for him.
Well, I am Peter, and I'm a visiting scientist here at the UW Center for Limnology, and in one more week I'll be on my way home. But one of the things I really enjoyed and had the great honor and the pleasure was to sing with this choir over there for a number of months, and this is a very specific piece of memory to take home. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen.
We light this candle in the memory of a member of our extended family, Anita Dater, who was killed last week in Mali by terrorists. She was a very lovely person.
I'm Lloyd, and this is Pat Egan. We have a joy and a sorrow today. We have a new granddaughter as of October 3rd, Juniper Quinn, and she is in Baby Haven right now. The sorrow is that my father, John Lewis, had a mild stroke October 23rd, but it has accelerated frontotemporal dementia, and he is not expected to recover. So it's a tough time for our family as we're with him during his final journey.
In 2011, my mother moved here so that we could care for her, and on October 17th, this past month, she passed away. She was 92. Margaret Ann Woods, born in 1923 and had a good life, and we miss her.
I'm Teresa Kaufman. I wanted to take an opportunity to light a candle for the life and death of my next door neighbor who accidentally overdosed on her pain medication. It was a really, really tragic evening for her husband and herself and all of us, all the neighbors. And then I was horrified to realize I have at least 2 other friends who take opioid medication. So please, if that's something you need to do, be very, very careful.
Hi, my name is Laurel, and this is Sam, and we are guests here today, but Sam had something, a joy that he wanted to share, he said.
I have the joy for snow.
I have a joy that yesterday night I went to this Middleton thing called a tree lighting, and we got to see this enormous tree by the Middleton Hall light up.
My name is Evan Mushka, and this is Adam Mushka, and we have a joy that on November 9th, we got a new baby cousin named Delaney.
I'm Kathy Toll. After being a member here for several years, in March, my partner David and I moved to Appleton, where I had lived previously, and I took a position with UW Oshkosh as a faculty member and closer to my mom, etc. Anyhow, we're back here visiting today, and I have three joys to share. First of all, being back here today. Second of all, my partner David is no longer my partner, he's my husband. We got married in August, and it's the first time for me. And David, over the last few years, has been developing his skill as a fine art photographer, and he has his first show today here at FUS.
Hi, well, I have a sorrow that my friend's gonna be going to India for a while, and yeah.
We went to Legoland.
Thank you for all those personal sharings. And the last candle is lit in commemoration of the lives lost in recent weeks through acts of terrorism, and also for any unexpressed joys and sorrows that occurred to you as others were speaking. We hold those with tenderness in our hearts as well. Let us just be a community of silence for a moment. Blessed be, and amen. And our children may leave for classes now as we sing them out with hymn number 322, verses 1, 2, and 5. Thanks be for these my Please be seated. We continue our service with this well-known passage from the 6th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, or about your body, what you shall wear. Is life not more than food? Is not the body more than clothing? Look at the birds in the air. They neither sow, nor do they reap, nor do they gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life? Why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor do they spin, and yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his glory was clothed as one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the fields, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? And therefore do not worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? Strive first for the kingdom and its righteousness, and all of these will be given unto you as well. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring worries of its own. Today's troubles are enough for today. And then in a somewhat different and contrasting vein, this from the Unitarian Universalist minister and humorist Robert Fulgham. A friend of mine named Bree, who was 12 years old at the time of this story, she is willing to go anywhere with me that involves dressing up. She likes my company, and I like hers. We both like looking good and laughing hard. She's my kind of guy. Technically speaking, she's my grandchild. But I emphasize that we are friends out of mutual admiration, not merely blood kin. She is old and wise beyond her years. I am young and goofy behind my years. She aspires to adulthood, but hasn't quite got the hang of it. And I know what's required of adults, but I just can't get used to being one. Now, with regard to these dress-up occasions, one in particular, Bree went along with me to a wedding where I was the ministerial officiant. Very romantic occasion that went off much better than I had expected. Both the mother of the bride and the mother of the groom were perfectly pleased. Amazing. The bride and groom lived happily ever after, at least as long as the reception. Laughter, tears, hugging, dancing, eating, drinking, home run with the bases loaded. During the ride home, Bree was unusually quiet. I parked the car and we walked hand in hand toward my house where she was spending the night. Still quiet. And then suddenly she said, "I wonder where he is tonight." "Who?" "You know, him. The guy I'm going to marry someday. The father of your great-grandchildren. He must be out there somewhere. Well, where is he?" "I can't imagine. Why do you ask?" "Well, you see, I worry about him. I hope he's okay." "Well," I said, "if you're going to meet up with him somewhere down the road, then I'm sure he must be fine, safe in the hands of fate." Silence. I looked down and I saw that her lip was trembling. Her eyes were full of tears. "What's wrong, Bree?" "Well, what if he got hit by a truck? What if he's out there hurt?" I felt tears welling in my own eyes. "That would be awful," I said. Yes, she said. "He would be so sad, so lonely without me." Just then, we went in the kitchen door, and my wife saw our distress. "What's wrong with the two of you?" she asked. "Her husband was hit by a truck," I moaned. "And we don't even know where he is or who's taking care of him." "What?" Underneath this story is the question that I often ask myself: what will become of me? Someone once asked me, if you could know everything that will ever happen to you for the rest of your life, but you could not change a single thing about it, would you want to know? Well, some days, yes, but mostly no. But I can't stop wondering, even if it doesn't make any sense, even if I really don't believe in fate or destiny or the one and only, still, I wonder. And meanwhile, the trucks of fate continue to roll on by, and the trick is not to get run over by one. The trick is to be there, alert, by the side of the road with your thumb out. And if the truck with your number on it just happens to come along, you will know about it, and you will get in, and you will go, and the ride will be as long and as lovely as you had ever imagined it would be.
Friends.
Thank you, friends. A perfect pre-Thanksgiving anthem. Perhaps we could use a little more choral music in that genre because, as Americans, we probably need it. According to a 2002 World Mental Health Survey, we are a notoriously anxious people. We worry a lot. More worry, in fact, than those who live in troubled countries like Ukraine, Nigeria, and Lebanon. 1 in 5 of us today suffers from an anxiety disorder of one sort or another. And as a population, we spend more than $2 billion a year on medications to mitigate those conditions. This may seem strange, given that the average American is amply supplied with the basic necessities: ample food, shelter, proper clothing, schools, medical care, personal transportation, public safety. We aren't exactly in the same position as the Pilgrims, who stepped off the Mayflower 400 years ago in late November with little more than the clothes on their backs. That first winter of 1620, half of those English refugees perished from exposure or poor nutrition. But thanks to Squanto and the remaining members of his Patuxet tribe, already decimated by diseases introduced by the European explorers, thanks to the Patuxet, the Pilgrims adapted to their new surroundings. 60 or so of them were still around to celebrate with their gracious hosts the first Thanksgiving the following year, an event that was, more than likely, a traditional native harvest festival. It is perhaps ironic that the Patuxet were not more suspicious of these bad-smelling white interlopers who had occupied a site where, in better days, members of their own once numerous tribe had lived and worked. Without Indian assistance, the Plymouth Rock settlers would almost certainly have been up the creek. By contrast, in today's America, collective worry over refugees has led to both extreme rhetoric and extreme policy proposals. As we know, over 3 million Syrians and an equal number of Iraqis have now been displaced due to conflicts that the U.S. helped to instigate and for which we bear significant responsibility. And these burgeoning numbers have created a resettlement problem of crisis proportions in Jordan, in Turkey, in Lebanon, and more recently in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children have fled from war-torn countries seeking asylum, straining the capacity of countries ill-equipped to absorb them. And now, in light of recent terrorist attacks in Paris, persons of Middle Eastern extraction stand under a dark cloud of suspicion. Now, perhaps, given Americans' still vivid memories of 9/11, we should not be surprised that many of our own citizens seem as worried, if not more worried, than the British, the Germans, and even the French. You know, despite the carnage created by the ISIS operation 8 days ago, President Francois Hollande has renewed his country's commitment to accept large numbers of Syrian refugees. Yes, European nations are tightening their security. They're taking additional steps to ensure their citizens' safety, but they are not reacting with the paranoia being displayed on this side of the Atlantic. There have been a number of calls to close the door completely to further Syrian immigration, or to allow only Syrian Christians to enter the U.S. The governors of 31 states have now declared Middle Eastern refugees to be persona non gratis. Just 2 days ago, Indiana's governor refused entry to 2 Syrian families who had been living in a Jordanian camp for over 3 years. Other proposals have included closing all of America's Muslim mosques and creating a national Muslim database. Faced with growing opposition to his own resettlement plan, President Obama has remained defiant. Slamming the door in the face of refugees would betray our deepest values, he tweeted. That is not who we are, and that is not what we are going to do. Well, that pronouncement hardly satisfied South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, who is demanding a risk-free immigration plan that guarantees America's absolute safety. An impossibility, as we know. So why do Americans worry so much? Why have we become so fearful? Well, truth be told, this is nothing new. The 1850s saw the rise of the American Party, better known to historians as the Know-Nothings. The Know-Nothings adamantly opposed Irish and, more broadly, Roman Catholic immigration. A few decades later, in the grip of the Yellow Peril, the U.S. Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which basically shut the door to Chinese immigration for over 60 years. And of course, more recently, politicians have stoked Americans' fears of immigrants from south of the border. It is indeed puzzling that a country comprised almost entirely of immigrants and their offspring could be so inhospitable toward those who are seeking the same opportunities as my German and Swedish and English ancestors. Is it violence that we are afraid of? Well, statistics indicate, Donald Trump to the contrary, that Latino immigrants, documented and undocumented, commit violent crimes at a significantly lower rate than the American population as a whole. As Jonathan Rauch wrote in The Atlantic last March, President Obama catches flack when he lectures the American public not to be so darn worried. If you watch the nightly news, he says, it feels like the world is falling apart. I promise you, he said, that things are much less dangerous now than they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And you know what, Rauch continues? Obama is simply right, and the alarmists are simply wrong. Because violent crime in this country has declined by more than 70% since the early 1990s. And the 2011 homicide rate reached its lowest level since 1963. Moreover, Americans are 4 times more likely to drown in a bathtub than to die in a terrorist attack. Rauch quotes Stephanie Rigolo of the Libertarian Cato Institute, who observes that no great power in world history has come close to enjoying the traditional state security that the U.S. does today. Human beings are, Jonathan Rauch allows, we are hardwired to overreact to perceived threats. And in an earlier age, this hypervigilance did serve a protective function. The snap of a twig, the sight of a shadowy figure could alert us to a dangerous predator. Today, however, this attribute can often be maladaptive, leading us to take the kind of extreme measures to adopt state and national policies that end up undermining our freedoms and ultimately serving to reduce rather than enhance our security. And memory also plays a role in this fear factor. Rauch says that incidents of murder and mayhem make a much deeper impression on us than long stretches of peace and serenity. We conjure up this world that is teeming with perils, pitfalls, and then we tend to overestimate the likelihood of calamitous events in the future. None of the foregoing, however, should be construed as an argument against worry and its place in our emotional repertoire. No, we should not allow our fears and our worries to override common sense and compassion. But on the other hand, complacency carries with it some very real dangers of its own. In that same Atlantic article, Jonathan Rauch characterized ISIS, back in March, as an almost entirely local menace. ISIS lacked, he said, an active lethal presence in either Europe or the U.S. 9 days ago, we learned the hard way that this was simply not the case. And so perhaps those who had been entrusted with France's security, perhaps they should have worried a little more. So worry, in other words, is by no means unnecessary and inexpedient emotion. Problems do arise when our worry becomes excessive or is chronic or is misdirected. There are times that call for worry. There are occasions that warrant worry. And yes, Jesus counseled his listeners not to give any thought to the morrow, to simply take care of business today. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life, he asked? Actually, yes, you can. Worry, that intuitive sense that something is not quite right, that feeling of impending peril, can protect us, can protect our loved ones, and add days, weeks, months, even years to our lives. Worry begets vigilance, exactly what we need to stay out of harm's way. Robert Fulgham's experience with his granddaughter, who was worried to tears about the safety of her future husband, that highlights a type of concern that seems just a little bit out of whack. But Fulgham's conclusion is the right one. Stay alert, because a truck with your name on it may be barreling towards you. It's reasonable to worry a little bit about the sobriety and the skills of other people out there on the highway. Now, worry does, of course, produce stress. In extreme cases, it can become an anxiety disorder whose physical symptoms might include heart palpitations, hypertension, insomnia, and yes, a foreshortened lifespan. Clearly, heightened worry like this doesn't serve us well, but moderate worry may. For instance, there was a recent study published in the journal Emotion, which tested this thesis. Does a little bit of worry actually help? Tested it on a sampling of students who were taking the bar exam. Once they had completed the testing and were awaiting the results, some of the students adopted this kind of fatalistic attitude. They just relaxed and said, what will be, will be. Others, however, continued to be anxious, and they found it very difficult to tamp down their worries. Yes, they hoped for the best, but they also braced themselves for possible failure. Well, ultimately, the scores were posted, and which group was better prepared to handle the information they received? The worriers. The worriers were both more thrilled if they passed and less devastated if they failed. As Dr. Karen Sweeney observes, if the news was bad, the worriers were ready with productive, reasonable responses. And if they passed, they were elated. But woe to those who remained calm. Those who sailed through the waiting period were shattered and paralyzed by the bad news, and if they got good news, well, they were underwhelmed. So does worry get an undeserved bad rap? To a certain extent, it probably does. If worry raises our stress level, we presume that it must be avoided because, well, stress is bad for you. But that, too, may be an oversimplification because other recent research suggests that, generally speaking, stress is harmful only if the subject believes it's harmful. If we reframe the experience of stress and regard it in a more positive light, its physiological effects are, in fact, dampened. Kelly McGonigal says that over 100,000 Americans may have died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for you. I once had a female colleague who served a large UU congregation in Texas, and she always struck me as a little bit high-strung. Stress, she once conceded, is my drug of choice, which was another way of saying that she found stress in her life, at least her professional life, to be useful rather than discomforting. You know what? I share her sentiments. After nearly 40 years of public speaking, not a day goes by that I don't worry about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. The same is true for rites of passage. Despite having conducted 700-plus weddings and half that many memorial services in my career, I always worry about getting it right. If worrying can be kept within manageable limits, the psychologist John Grohol suggests, that worry will help prepare us to give the best performance that we possibly can. Worry also is the active demonstration of concern. Now, those of us who are parents know that when our children enter adolescence and have begun chafing at the bit, they may express some concern or frustration with what they see as exaggerated parental care. Recoiling from their parents' worry, they will say, "Don't treat me like I'm still a kid. I know how to take care of myself." Anybody heard that? But if, as parents, we don't share our worries, our kids might ultimately judge us to be indifferent, apathetic. So as long as it doesn't suffocate them, as long as it does not create significant resentment, worry reassures our sons and daughters that we really do care about their welfare. And this can be true for non-family members who fall within our orbit as well. In his powerful book that some of you have just read, Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson, who has been litigating on behalf of condemned prisoners for over a quarter of a century, he admitted at one point that after 25 years, he was just plain worn out from worry. He worried about pending execution dates. He worried about upcoming decisions from the Supreme Court. He worried about not having sufficient staffing and resources to carry on the fight. He worried about released prisoners and their struggles. And despite all of his victories and all of his accomplishments, Stevenson felt overwhelmed. "It's time to stop," he wrote. "I just can't do this anymore." But then, like the protagonist in Samuel Beckett's novel, The Unnameable, Stevenson, a couple of pages later, says to himself, "I can't go on, but I must go on." The beleaguered attorney realized that not only were his worries inescapable, they were also helpful because they are exactly what motivated him in his ongoing struggle for justice. For Brian Stevenson, the emotion is not disabling. Why? Because he moves from the pain of worry into constructive activities that prove to be its antidote. And we can do the same. But that means being selective, letting go of the sources of worry and anxiety over which we can exert little, if any, influence, and then turning instead our attention toward issues where we do have some leverage. At a personal level, that may mean, if we're worried about retirement, being more intentional about planning for that retirement. If we're worried about our children, keeping closer tabs on the social media that they are using, moving from worry to actual activity. And in the social and political sphere, there are many issues that are worthy of our worry. The criminalization of poverty, hostility toward the Muslim faith and its members, glaring inequities in housing, education, and employment. We worry a lot about the future without there being anything we can really do about it, Art Markham says. So find an action you can perform and engage in it. But can we really choose not to worry about certain things and be selective in what we worry about? Well, according to the Stanford anthropologist T.H. Luhrmann, about a third of us are born with a genetic predisposition for a higher level of anxiety, which may, in fact, make it difficult for us to worry less. And then furthermore, overexposure to a sensationalist, conflict-driven media increases our propensity to worry. And so these days, I think many Americans suffer from this kind of free-floating anxiety that then latches on to each disaster du jour and raises it to near-panic levels. So it's important to find an activity you can engage in, and it's important to develop a strategy that can help us to understand and to moderate our worries. Because, as Sharon Salzberg says, when we lose the sense of having choice, we forget that things can change, and those negative mind states begin to solidify. They begin to seem permanent. And so a mindfulness practice of some sort can lead to a greater sense of self-empowerment, the ability to face our demons and find the strength to stare them down. So in other words, attempts to repress or to run away from worry, it usually doesn't work very well. It is by allowing those worries to enter and to pass through consciousness that we are able over time to identify their underlying source, to put them in proper perspective, and to control our own reactivity. Steady yourself and see that it is your own thinking that darkens your world, John O'Donohue writes. But search, and you will find a diamond thought of light, and a new confidence will come alive to urge you toward higher ground, where your imagination will learn to engage difficulty as its most rewarding threshold. Blessed be, and amen. There is a truck outside today gathering up turkeys and fixings for St. Vinny's, and your offering today will also be dedicated toward providing Thanksgiving meals for people without resources. Please be generous. now to our closing hymn, number 151. Inspired with gratitude for the wonderful gifts that are ours, and moved by the desire to share this undeserved bounty with life's fellow travelers, we prepare to re-enter the world as it is. May we leave here sensitized to the world's unfulfilled needs, but also with a song of thanksgiving on our lips to the Creator and the Sustainer of this daily miracle that I am and that we are. Blessed be. Please be seated for the postlude.
May your heart
Thank you.